a hopeless addict with nowhere to turn.
I just found myself in that dark spot. The thoughts of wanting to commit suicide.
Finds hope in an old story.
If Joseph can forgive his brothers for doing what they had done, maybe there was hope for me.
On today's 700 Club Interactive. On 700 Club Interactive, we use technology to pray for each other and explore topics that matter to you. Watch what God is doing in the world today. Well, welcome to the program. On any given night in America, over 1 million people will be homeless. And while many are victims of their financial situation, others are dealing with mental illness and addictions that have left them with nowhere to turn.
As a professional cyclist, Scott Sowle never imagined he could be homeless. However, one choice after another led him away from his career and to the streets.
It just went downhill. I started living on the streets in Dallas. I lived in the streets of Houston. I went from there to Los Angeles in downtown and lived in Skid Row there, and then back to Salt Lake City.
But life wasn't always like this for Scott Sowle. At one point, he was rising in the ranks as a professional cyclist.
I started winning, so I thought I could just go out and start celebrating. And it just went from one celebration to sitting in a bar and starting to use drugs all the time. I couldn't even get back on a bike. I mean, I would try, but riding bike and doing heroin just didn't mix too well. Outside of Phoenix, Arizona, it was supposed to be a premier event for not just racing, but for sponsors, and I didn't even show up. I never would be able to get another sponsor after that. It was all one big black hole.
Scott began living on the streets, moving from city to city, struggling with his drug addiction. But at a university library, he found he had a surprising talent.
Many of the homeless would go to universities, whether it's the library or whether it's computers, but I was able to learn how to web design by tearing down websites and rebuilding them. They started allowing me to come in and sit in classes. As time progressed and I was getting better and I was making money, they couldn't understand why I was still out on the streets. And I wouldn't tell them that I was having a drug problem. I'd figure out a way to hide it all the time. I had hooked up with an individual who had an eBay store, and I started helping them out to grow the business, and I started making money. Just put me in a comfortable spot of saying, I'm succeeding again, I can go celebrate again.
But Scott's new success couldn't pull him out of his drug addiction.
It took me like 3 or 4 days to go through a paycheck, and I just found myself in that dark spot. The thoughts of wanting to commit suicide if I didn't find some help. There was a community group that met on a Tuesday night, and I just walked in, and they all put their arms around me and loved me.
The next morning, Scott was admitted into a recovery program. He got clean, but was still dealing with his past.
The first 30 days, you're in a blackout period, so you have no contact as far as email or phone or anything of the sort. So I was up late at night. Normally, all your caseworkers are gone. When I saw the light, I said, okay, yeah, I'm okay. So I walked in and I sat down and told my caseworker what was going on in my life. And Tuan gave me a story in Genesis about Joseph, and asked me to read it. And it was kind of interesting, you know, I sat down and read it that night. I read it the next day. The thing that really struck me was Joseph's brothers committed so many sins against him, yet he was still able to forgive them. And I could relate to that part of being those brothers because I have committed so many sins in my life. And I was just like, wow, if Joseph can forgive his brothers for doing what they had done, maybe there was hope for me. And that was the moment that I actually got on my knees in the Union Gospel Mission and give my life to Christ. Every morning, early in the morning, I would wake up and go to the workout room. I knew there was nobody else within the room, but I was just sitting there and just clearly recognizing God. When an arm reached around me and grabbed a hold of my shoulder and just squeezed it. Whew. It sends chills down me right now. This hug just came. And then it wasn't words, it was a whisper of a wind that was, "I love you." And I knew at that moment that that was his presence there. And it was something I needed. And it's something that we all need, is to understand he loves us all the time and not just part of the time.
Scott finally had found the peace he longed for, but now he needed a purpose. He found inspiration from his time on the streets.
About 5 years before I came here to Seattle, I was living on the streets. I needed a pair of work boots to be able to go to work at a temporary job. After 30 days of asking, an individual from one of the organizations came to me, and she had tears in her eyes as she was explaining this. She said, "We get clothing, we get food, we get blankets, we get hygiene kits, but we just never get footwear." Most people don't understand it, but when you're on the street, there's times that you may not be out of your shoes for literally days. It was something that stuck with me.
In 2010, Scott started the nonprofit Redeeming Souls. His mission now is to use footwear to share the gospel.
And as of today, we've done over 50,000 pairs of shoes. And it's not so much the footwear for me. I mean, that's just an avenue to have them ask me a question: how did your life change? And once they ask that, the big, huge smile comes across my face, and just go like, God, that he does care, and he cares about us all, and always does, and always will. Give him a chance.
Well, what Scott said, he always loves us, always. You can depend on that. You can rely on that. His love never fails. He can't deny himself. When we're faithless, he remains faithful. And when you start understanding that, you get rid of all those horrible thoughts that somehow God's given up on you, or God is mad at you, or God doesn't want you to turn around. If the good Lord's willing kind of talk that we all have. And we all get into this negative feeling, and it feeds on itself. Addictions thrive with this, thrive in self-condemnation. It starts off as a way, okay, let's celebrate. You've done something good, or you want to have a great weekend. Let's go out and celebrate. Then it turns into, well, how can I medicate this emotion? Something's bad happened to me. My people around me didn't treat me properly, and so I'm going to go medicate that emotion away. And then next thing you know, it's turned into a cycle. Whether it's celebration or medication, you just can't seem to get away from it. And every time you've got money, the first thing you're thinking about is, how do I get that? How do I get even more? The very thing that's killing you. The very thing that's taking your life away bit by bit. Maybe it's taking your family away. Maybe it's taking your children away. Maybe it's taking your job away. In Scott's case, it took everything away. And he couldn't break free until he found that love, the love that passes all our understanding. And he found it in a very odd way in the story of Joseph. Here's Joseph. He's doing really well. He's one of his father's favorite sons. Gets a wonderful cloak, got these great dreams coming from God. His brothers get mad at him, throw him in a pit, sell him into slavery. Then, after he's a slave in Egypt, he rises in this wonderful household of one of the leading citizens of Egypt. And then it's all taken away. Why? Because he wants to do the righteous thing. But he's falsely accused. He's thrown into prison. There he rises again. He's got great skills. He rises again. Only to have it all abandoned and not remembered. The very people he helped in prison didn't in turn help him. They promised they would remember him, but they didn't. Until finally Pharaoh has a dream. And then Joseph is released, and he's able to become a prince of Egypt. Now, that may be a story like you've gone through, where you've had successes, but then you've had these massive failures. And maybe it wasn't just, and maybe it wasn't righteous, and maybe you didn't deserve any of it. But the good news for you is God still has a plan, and he can still see you through. And when we start realizing the final victory is the victory of knowing we will be with him for all eternity, that everything around us is passing away. It's here for but a moment, and then it vanishes. And the only thing that matters is, where will you spend eternity? And until you know that love, you won't have the assurance of where you'll be. If you want this, if you want to have that experience, it's real simple. Ask for it. Jesus, if you're real, if you're there, if you love me, if you can turn my life around, well, I want that. I want to know you. I want to know about this love I hear people talk about. I want to know about this peace. You took Scott, you turned his life around, you took away the drugs, you gave him a future and a hope and a whole new way of helping people. Could you do that for me? And if you pray that with all of your heart, he'll answer. He'll come in. He'll make you new again. What he's done for others, he will do for you, because God's love never fails, and it won't fail you. If you want help with this prayer, if there are things that you think you've done that can't be forgiven, and I just want to, have people say, okay, I hear you on that, but Jesus says there's no sin that can't be forgiven. Will you believe him? We're here for you. All you got to do is make a toll-free call. 888-777-1999. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. When you call, I've got a free packet for you. It's a CD teaching. What do you do now? How do you live the Christian life? What do Christians believe? What are the pillars of the Christian faith? All free, phone call free. Make it now. 888-777-1999. Terry?
Well, still ahead, meet the man who says it's never too late to reinvent yourself after this.
A first-hand account of the Holocaust from the diary of a young girl.
I'll never find my way around here. But so what? We won't be here for long. There are 21 of us in quite a small room. If you haven't seen it with your own eyes, you would never believe it.
Hear how this Jewish girl and her journal and drawings survived on the next 700 Club Interactive.
If you're the mother of a child with behavior problems, I'd like to talk to you. My name is Janet Lehman, and I'm a behavioral therapist and a mom. I know what it's like when the child that you love becomes a defiant, out-of-control child who disrespects you.
That's why my husband James and I created the Total Transformation, the program that tens of thousands of moms are now using to turn around their child's behavior.
If you've heard about the Total Transformation and wondered if it will work for you, now you can try it for free. I'm willing to give away 1,000 programs today for free.
All you need to do is get the program and let us know how it works for you. We'll let you keep it for free.
I know the Total Transformation works because I used these techniques with my own son and with troubled kids for over 30 years. Let me prove to you that it works by giving you the program free.
Call the number on your screen now to get the Total Transformation free.
With unemployment on the rise, many Americans are not just forced to find a new job, but also a new career. And as much as this may seem like a daunting task, today's guest believes there's no time like the present to make a fresh start.
Being awesome isn't that complicated. In fact, there are only 5 things you have to do. And it's the same 5 things that people have done since the dawn of time to be awesome. and they used to be based on your age. You see, in your 20s, you enter into this land of learning. You don't know who you are yet. You don't know what you're all about, so you try 100 different things. You have a lot of different relationships, a lot of different friendships, and that's your 20s. In your 30s, you enter into this land of editing. You say, I did these 100 things, here are the 10 that matter to me most. You start to edit your relationships. You start to realize, I can't be best friends with everybody. In your 40s, you go through this time of mastering. That's when you get the best at your job. You make the most money. Your relationships go the deepest they're going to go. In your 50s, you start harvesting. All the decisions you've made along the way start to come home. And in your 60s, you enter into this land of guiding, where you reach back and help people down their own road to awesome. Now, the good news, the great news for you and I, is that it's no longer about when you were born, it's now about when you decided to live. There's 3 factors that have taken the age off the table. So whether you're 60 or 40 or 20, you can start. You can walk down this road, and there's some simple rules and some simple ideas along the way that will guide us. So that's what this book Start is all about, because now it's time to punch fear in the face. It's time to escape average. It's time to do work that matters. And above all, it's time to start.
Well, joining us now is that author, Jon Acuff. John, welcome to 700 Club Interactive.
Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, many people are being forced to reinvent themselves these days. What would you tell them is the first thing they need to do to start down that road?
Well, usually the first thing is to believe that they have the permission to do that. You know, a lot of times people suffer from fear. Fear is schizophrenic. It's brilliant because it argues both sides of the coin. One day you wake up and fear tells you you're too young, you don't have enough experience. One day you wake up and it tells you you're too old, you missed your chance. And if you ask fear, when was I the right age to chase this dream? It'd say, oh, there were 5 minutes in 1997. It would have been magical, but you were asleep. And so the first thing most of us have to deal with is those fears that have held us back.
I've heard it said that in sort of among the elderly, there's a lot of regret sometimes. They didn't take that risk, and they didn't punch fear in the face. What does it take to sort of just really overcome it, to say, I'd rather live my life doing what I really want to do, what's my heart's desire. I want to take that risk. What sort of helps them get over the hump?
Well, that's a great question. And the guy I work for, Dave Ramsey, always tells me that inspiration without instruction is useless. And so there are some very practical things in my book Start about that. I mean, when it comes to fear, the first thing you need to do is write them down. In your head, fear is loud and creative. It's a bully. You put it on a piece of paper and you can see how small it is. Fear hates the light of day. The second thing is you need to refute it with truth. Not argue with it, not get tangled, but say the truth. For instance, I woke up one Monday morning at 7:30 and I felt this dread of the week's already over. I've missed it. I'm already late. I'm behind. And I wrote down a simple line that said, that's not true. I couldn't have more week ahead of me if I wanted to. And the third thing, the thing that fear fears is community. Fear fears you getting plugged in with a group of people who are honest about their fears. So the third thing I encourage people to do is share them. And so one of the things we did, we created a site called nomorevoices.com where people can share their fear. And you can share a fear and click Me Too. And what we're seeing, we saw 1,000 fears in the first 24 hours. And people have tweeted me saying, I burst into tears when I went back to nomorevoices.com and 40 people had clicked Me Too on a fear I thought was mine alone.
Wow. What's the biggest question a person can ask themselves?
What gives me the most joy? We sometimes think joy is selfish, but joy is contagious. When you discover what you're called to do, you want to help everybody else do it. And Christians have a really hard time with this. Sometimes we've made God into this guy that likes to do the worst thing to us. I mean, I talk to people about giving their whole life to God. And if you've been to church one time, your fear is that as soon as you give God your life, he's going to say, sell everything you own and move to Africa to become a missionary. You'll go 0 to hut in 4 seconds. But maybe that's not the plan. And what does it say about our God if the first thing he does to us is the worst thing we could imagine? We have the worst God. So I think that a lot of times right now culturally in the prodigal son story, we'd come home and refuse the party because it's too nice. But what a gift that we have a God who fixes problems with a party. Nobody else does that in life. You've never failed at work and they said, you lost $1 million account. Party! And so I really think joy is important for us to explore.
Well, why is it so hard for us to trust God with our future? I think that's sort of the root of this fear, that You know, he's put these heart's desires in us. He's done it for a purpose, and then he promises he wants to give us our heart's desire. Why do we fear to trust him?
Well, I think that what I'm seeing in colleges, for instance, I'll have college students tell me, I want to serve God. I love him. I want to be part of his kingdom work, but I love filmmaking. And what a lie of the enemy that is, to put God on one side and your passion and your dreams over here. It should be, I love God and I want to serve him and I love filmmaking, and you redeem filmmaking. So I think sometimes we forget the story of Paul, for instance. Let's look at Saul, hard-driven, aggressive, charismatic leader. God gets a hold of him and makes him live in a cave and do the opposite of his personality, quietly writing hymns. No, God says, hey, now you're going to be a hard-driven, charismatic, aggressive leader for me. So my joy is trying to help people understand that figuring out what you're called to do isn't walking away from God, it's walking into that, to a God who knew you in the womb, who redeems your life with good things.
One of the top questions I get on this show, and it seems to be almost every day, a lot of people are unemployed and they ask for favor, prayer for favor in job interviews. They ask, how do I find a new job? What would you tell unemployed Americans today?
Sure. Being unemployed is about 3 circles that you have to figure out: geography, industry, and type of employment. And what I mean by that is when you lose your job, that first month, you can have a small geography circle. You can say, I only want to look in Nashville. You can have a small industry. You can say, I only want to work in advertising. You can have a small job type. I only want a permanent position. The longer you go unemployed, though, you have to expand your circles. And so, for instance, you might go, okay, it's month 3. I'm going to look in Nashville and Memphis. And I'm going to look at advertising and corporate. And I'm going to take some contract work. So what I tell the unemployed people is expand the circles. And then a simple tip is for your resume, never put your goals at the top of your resume. Everybody puts their goals. And those are just empty words. Put your results. Create a sharp paragraph where one sentence from each job you ever had that talks about your results. Results get read on resumes. Goals, which everybody can write, get ignored.
Yeah, I like to tell people, tell me how you're going to make money for your employer. That's the best way to get a job. If it's give me a job, it's not going to happen. But if you tell somebody how you can make them more money, then it's going to show me the results. I agree with that. Well, John, thanks for being with us, and thanks for the advice. For more information on the subject, all you have to do is go to 700 Club Interactive, and John's book, Start, is available nationwide. Terry?
Well, coming up, a little boy dies and then gets up and walks. You don't want to miss this. We'll be back.
In 2008, my husband Gary departed for heaven. I was still grieving. And then to find out I had cancer, I began praying, God, how do I do this? Where do I do this? Cancer Treatment Centers of America was the place. Dr. Neelam outlined a plan that would take care of my mind and my body, and she prayed with me.
For Bible-believing Christians, we're able to pray with them in a much deeper way as they begin to really rely upon their faith.
At Cancer Treatment Centers of America, we believe in the power of faith and prayer as indispensable allies in the fight against complex and advanced stage cancer.
I'm back in Telluride on the mountain skiing. I feel strong and healthy.
Advanced medicine and technology.
And I am a survivor.
The warm embrace of the spirit and the power of prayer.
These are happy tears.
Please go to cancercenter.com/faith. Appointments available now. Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Care that never quits.
CBN TV on CBN.com. All the video you love in one easy-to-use location.
Soccer is the world's most popular sport, and one Nigerian boy named Abraham says it's popular in heaven too, because one day he played there. Here's his story.
6-year-old Abraham was all his mother Angel had. Her husband left them when little Abraham was only 3 months old, but Angel's joy was tainted by fear because Abraham was always sick.
I loved my son so much and did all I could to save him. He suffered from asthma since he was a baby. I worked very hard farming and doing domestic jobs just to pay his medical bills. One day he was very pale and barely breathing.
By the time they came to the hospital, Abraham had asthma, tuberculosis, and anemia. That day his temperature was low, his breathing was labored, and his body was cold. I knew he would not survive, so I told him to go home.
But Abraham never made it. He died on the way home from the hospital.
When I discovered he was dead, I wanted to die myself.
In their village, it's considered taboo to bury someone on a Friday, so Abraham's body was kept until the next day. As the mourners grieved, someone said they should call an evangelist who is supported by CBN. When the pastor arrived, he encouraged them and said they should believe in God. Then he said a prayer and played tapes of CBN shows.
I assured them that a miracle would happen and Abraham would resurrect. But the villagers started hurling insults at me, saying, "How can a person who died over 24 hours ago rise again?" But I was encouraged that with God, all things were possible.
As the crowd watched CBN's Turning Point, one of the hosts began to pray for miracles. At that moment, an amazing thing happened.
We were all surprised to see the body move. Just when they were ready to take him away for burial, he came back to life.
The people were shocked. Then he arose, and we thanked God.
It's no story, it happened. The boy was dead, but after 24 hours, he rose up again.
Immediately, a great celebration broke out in the village. Because of that miracle, dozens of people gave their lives to Christ, including the doctor who had treated Abraham.
I was an idol worshiper and never knew the power of God. But when I got to the village and heard about Abraham's miracle, I accepted Christ. Many of my doctor friends gave their lives to Christ too.
When Abraham went back to the hospital, the doctor gave him a clean bill of health. He doesn't even have asthma anymore. Though he can hardly remember what it was like to be sick all the time, Abraham has vivid memories of the time he spent in heaven.
I was at a place, everyone there was glowing. We played a soccer game and I scored, so they said I should go back home.
Thank God for CBN Africa. This miracle has truly changed our lives and the lives of others.
One little boy and what seemed like a disaster turned into a miracle, and an entire community was changed. How did that happen? It happened because someone brought the Word of God right into the midst of that disaster, of that great loss of their mourning. CBN sent that pastor there. He's one of the people who works with us in that country, and we want to say thank you, because if you are a 700 Club member, you sent him. That's just one of the things that we're doing around the world. We're asking you to partner with us in what we do to bring the love and the message of God's love to people who are without knowledge of Him, to people who have serious need, to people who have health issues, to people who need food, clothing, a safe place to live, water to drink. Join the 700 Club. It's 65 cents a day, $20 a month. But when you join, you'll be joining with thousands and thousands of people who are saying, we are out to make a difference. You do all of this by calling the toll-free number that you're going to see on your screen right now. It's 1-888-777-1999. All you have to do is call and say, I want to join the 700 Club. Or you can log on to cbn.com. Gordon?
Well, let's go over to Dimitri in the chat room.
We have Debbie. Debbie says, people always say it's never too late to start and to just do what you love. But it's not that simple. I'm a single parent with 2 children and can't afford to follow my dream. So what is the point in dreaming?
Because dreaming is where you get your inspiration, and it's where you get your drive. If you're, I have a lot of sympathy for you, if you're a single mom with 2 kids. But here's a story for you. There was a single mom with 2 kids. And she got the idea to follow her dream. And so she said, I want to cook. I want to be known as a cook. And so she created a lunch service for the business district where she would hand deliver home-cooked meals to offices in the downtown area. Well, it turned into a thriving business, turned into a huge success, and that lady's name is Paula Dean. So follow your dream, even when it seems that there's no dream left. This is the word for you from Isaiah 43. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine.